Give a warm round of applause to Debra Medina, folks.
Thank you very much. That's very generous at the end of a long day. You can leave it to me to not say anything you've heard up here already. When Michael Bolden called me about doing this event, he said, is that right? Yeah? He said, we'd like you to talk about the role that the executive would play in a state that was truly exercising her state sovereignty, her constitutional authority as a sovereign state. And I am going to draw a little bit, since I'm ahead of him, I'm going to steal a little bit of Tom Wood's thunder. He's got a lot to throw at us, so I think it'll be all right. You're going to hear Tom talk about the Glover case out of Wisconsin in the 1850s. And that case has intrigued me because I think it's a very good example of how a state truly nullified and interposed against an overreaching federal government. There are many Supreme Court cases that would say that it is up to the federal courts to decide what's constitutional and what's not constitutional. There is an allegiance that our judicial members take to uphold the U.S. Constitution, and it has kind of gone without saying that that means the federal government's interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. And the guys in Wisconsin in 1854 have a little bit of a different take on that. If you've read Tom's book, Nullification, you know that there was a fugitive slave in Wisconsin who was arrested under the Fugitive Slave Act, and there was a newspaper reporter, a man named Sherman Booth, who rallied the public to an awareness of the violation of the individual rights of Mr. Glover. And consequently, Mr. Booth was arrested and brought before the magistrate there. The Wisconsin legislature repeatedly and the Wisconsin judiciary repeatedly failed to uphold this federal law. Even the federal courts within the state of Wisconsin, reacting to their people, wouldn't uphold this federal. I think Charles Key has taught me that we need to quit calling them federal laws. They are unconstitutional federal actions. They don't rise to the level of law. And so the judiciary in Wisconsin failed to prosecute. And Mr. Booth, remember Mr. Booth is the newspaper man who had called this atrocity to the attention of the people. And in his trial, Booth said, I am bold to say that rather than have the great constitutional rights and safeguards of the people, he was speaking specifically about the writ of habeas corpus and the right of trial by jury, stricken down by this law, I would prefer to see every federal officer in Wisconsin hanged on a gallows 50 cubits higher than that of Haman's. We better get serious about preserving and restoring this republic. Amen. And what we've had up here today, and what, frankly, you have had, is a lot of this. And that doesn't move us one inch closer to a restored constitutional republic. The state of Texas, the 10th Amendment new to anybody? State of Texas has been under conservative Republican leadership, majority conservative Republican leadership since the mid-90s. And most of us would have to look long and hard to find a single instance of where the state of Texas was even close to as bold as Mr. Booth was. When have we pushed back Washington? You see, we all got real excited, and many of you got very excited during the last Texas legislative session when HCR 50, carried by Brandon Creighton, went through. You remember that state sovereignty bill? I swear to God that it is hot in August in Texas. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. That ain't going to cut it. And swearing that the state of Texas is a sovereign state in this republic isn't going to cut it. We have got to have judges and law enforcement officials and legislators who will say that unconstitutional federal action is null and void and will be of no effect in this state. When the EPA tells the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality that they are going to withdraw our air permitting authority, what should we be saying to the EPA? That's right. That's right. Our local law enforcement ought to be at the front gate of every one of those production facilities that is being threatened and telling those EPA officials that they can leave or they will be arrested. They have no authority in the state of Texas. We have in office, I'm convinced, politicians who want nothing more than to get your vote in November. And want nothing more than to be reelected. So I suggest to you today that you begin to call them and put them in the hot seat. Because once that election is secured in November, your ability to influence their behavior has been dramatically diminished. Your understanding here today, your opportunity here today to visit with the brightest minds in the state of Texas studying this issue. I don't have all the answers, and I hope I never leave you with the opinion that I think that I do. I believe that iron sharpens iron and that wisdom comes from the minds of men. I hope that you will spend a lot of time in the breaks and after to network with those around you, exchange cards, get phone numbers, and get email addresses and figure out. In fact, we might ought to take an opportunity and say, you know, who here lives in Texas Senate District 1? There's only 31 of them, and begin to figure out where you're from, and y'all start to get together and put those guys on the spot. Because if you will say to them that we have to have bills that have teeth in them, bills that will truly stop Washington, D.C. from enforcing these onerous attempts at overregulation, then and only then do we begin to see the restoration of a sovereign state. The executive obviously is more than just the governor, and I have certainly made pretty clear some of my objections to the governor's leadership or lack thereof of our state, but it's not just the governor. We have a comptroller through whose office flows the fuel tax. Anybody like to see that kept in Texas? Yeah. Is there something in Article 1, Section 8 about a fuel tax? I didn't think that I had seen it there. Perhaps Texas should say that we will keep our fuel tax dollars in the state of Texas. And the comptroller could do that. And the Attorney General could continue and should continue. Ken Emanuelson made the point that we ought not rely on the federal court, but when we do, we need people to argue before the federal court in a constitutional manner. And we need the AG's office doing that. But we must be discerning as individuals, as citizens of this state, to hold those elected officials accountable and determine whether what they are waving in front of us is a flag that has no more import than passing a resolution that says it's hot in Texas in August. And I think that, and we get excited about that. And we hold rallies and we cheer because we've gotten this state sovereignty resolution through, and it does nothing. Don't let them off so easy.